Sometimes you just have to do it. I mean, get into the weeds with the religious just to show how irrational it all is. Now, I don't do it a lot, and I'll explain a bit as we go through, but this is not your standard everyday religious video. This is a special kind of stupidity, and that's saying something. So, let's get into it. Let's do some red pen illogic. This time it's on a video called "The Bible Cannot Condemn Homosexuality." You know, like it's a challenge. Of course it can. Religious books and religious people, they're very, very good at being hate-filled bigots. And I bet Tim is going to find a way that Christianity can hate people for no good reason other than they exist. Because Tim is a dick, just like his God. But let's see.
Do you know it's quite literally impossible for the Bible to condemn homosexuality? Because the word homosexual and the concept of modern sexuality didn't exist until the late 19th century.
That's wrong, and it's also stupid. Gay people have existed as long as people have existed. Maybe that specific word didn't exist in the same sense that English didn't exist back in the day, but the concept certainly did. In fact, we can find Mesolithic rock art in Sicily that depicts phallic male figures in pairs that have been interpreted as ancient gay couples. And this goes back as far as 9600 BCE. Going back to almost 3000 BCE, there was the body of a man found near modern-day Prague, buried in women's traditional clothing. Now, we don't know what that means exactly, but there are certainly options outside of the standard heterosexual mold. Two royal servants in ancient Egypt were probably the first same-sex couple ever depicted, right around 2400 BCE. They were the royal overseers of the manicurists, and they were found buried together in the same grave. King Zimri-Lim of the Kingdom of Mari was recorded as having male lovers back around 1775 BCE. There are tons and tons and tons and tons of other examples, so obviously homosexuality was a thing in the ancient world. So this is just completely wrong.
The Bible didn't have the word homosexual in it until 1946, when the writers of the Revised Standard Version of the Bible placed that word in the Bible as the translation of a mysterious Greek word, arsenokoitai.
Kind of true, but not really. Yes, that particular word didn't show up until 1946 with the publication of the RSV translation, but before that, other terms were certainly used that had the same or similar meanings. If you go back to old German versions from the 1800s, Leviticus 18:22, which modern translations record as "man shall not lie with man, for it is an abomination," the old German translations render it as "man shall not lie with young boys as he does with a woman, for it is an abomination." If you look at Leviticus 20:13, it's the same thing, just translated as young boys and not men. Because of this, there are a lot of gay Christians out there who have been trying to desperately claim that the Bible isn't against homosexuality, it's actually against child molesters. Well, boy molesters, since molesting girls was A-okay with God. Now, I'm sure that Tim isn't going to agree because, of course he isn't, but it really doesn't much matter since modern Christians are going to hate gay people by and large, no matter what the Bible actually says, because they don't really care about the Bible, do they? So I'm not sure why any of them bother, but, let's see.
All right, let's just assume for the sake of argument that the biblical authors did not understand the concept of sexuality as we know it today, and that they were completely unaware of loving, committed same-sex couples. It still wouldn't matter. Here's why.
Because Christians like Tim, they look at gay couples and go, ick. I mean, come on, let's be honest, that's what's really going on. Now, he can think what he wants to think, I don't care, because we can't legislate thought crimes, no matter how much some people seem to want to try. If you want to hate people, go ahead. Nobody can stop you. They can't control what's in your head. If you want to hate black people, knock yourself out. Nobody can stop you. What goes on inside your head is nobody's business but yours. Just keep it to yourself and don't act on it. Because while society can't stop your innermost thoughts, it absolutely can stop your racist, sexist, and hate-filled actions. Granted, the religious, at least for the most part, they'd be screaming, "But it's my religion!" because they don't care about society. They only care about their childish fifis. But I figure that's a topic for another time.
The Bible explicitly describes and prohibits the act of homosexual sex regardless of why people engage in it. Leviticus describes how you shall not lie with a male as one lies with a female is an abomination.
That's debatable. Of course, I don't think that we can count on Tim to actually be doing any research or anything, but even if he did, there are problems inherent in this whole thing. It's really hard to be sure what ancient people actually meant by the words that they used. We translate them into the closest modern equivalent that we can find, by our own understanding, with a whole lot of guesses mixed in, but we don't have any actual ancient people just standing around that we can run these translations past. I don't speak ancient Hebrew or Greek or any of that, but even for people who do, they're still making a lot of assumptions that we simply cannot entirely justify. Language is a very fiddly thing. Words are prescriptive, not descriptive. They mean whatever the people who used them wanted them to mean. Translations are largely just a guess. An educated guess, hopefully, but take it from someone whose daughter is a professional translator of modern languages, it is not as cut and dried as people would like to make it out to be, even in the modern world.
And the book of Romans describes how women exchanged the natural function for that which was unnatural, and men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire towards one another, men with men committing indecent acts. Notice that the word homosexual and homosexuality does not appear in these passages, yet the behavior described is clearly prohibited.
And from someone on the outside of your silly religious cult, so what? Now, I know this is a video being made by a Christian idiot for other Christian idiots, all of whom do care what it says in their big book of make-believe. I get it. However, in the real world, which is what we ought to be striving for, none of that actually matters, does it? Humans have always hated that which was different. It's why in-group and out-group dynamics are so clearly spelled out in most cultures. Yet, if we are going to look at these things intelligently, and I know this is the religious we're talking about, humor me, then what some primitive goat herders wrote down on a scroll halfway around the world thousands of years ago, why should any of us care today? Oh, yeah, right, this is Tim we're talking about. We can't introduce intelligent thought into the mix, can we? Because that's not going to get you anywhere.
So even if the biblical authors didn't understand the modern concept of homosexuality, and even if the biblical authors didn't ever use the word homosexuality, that wouldn't change the fact that the Bible still describes and condemns homosexual sex, the behavior itself.
Except you can't show that it actually did. Now, I'm not saying that gay Christians have a point or that they don't. I'm saying that it really doesn't matter. I'm saying that anyone with a brain shouldn't be clinging to this childish, primitive superstition at all. It's why when I look at a church service and I see women in the pews, I get disgusted because Christianity and other religions have done nothing positive for women at all throughout history. It has turned them into second-class citizens, sexual slaves for their husbands, who they were often just sold off to by their fathers because women had no value except as property. Why would anyone still pay any of this any mind? Or black people? Christianity has done some of the worst injustices toward black people of any organization ever. Yet there's a whole lot of black churches out there, aren't there? Now, I suppose there is something to be said about taking the thing that harmed you and turning it into a force for good. But yeah, this is religion we're talking about. Religion has been turning people into slaves, sometimes literally forever. This is not something that you ought to be engaged in, because it really makes you look like an idiot.
By the way, the Apostle Paul does use a Greek word, arsenokoitai, which is a compound word which literally means men who lie with males. Now, the Bible translates the word, wrongly in my opinion, as homosexuals, but I think it's better translated men who have sex with males, which again describes behavior, not attraction, and is consistent with Paul's concern about the behavior itself.
Again, who cares? Because I'm willing to bet that Tim isn't a Greek scholar either. In fact, as far as I can tell, he has no education in any relevant field whatsoever. Now, granted, you don't necessarily have to. You can refer to other experts, as we all do, since there's no way to become an expert in absolutely everything and still have time to live. I'm not on him for that. I'm just saying that this comes off as faith and not fact speaking. And if you go out and try to find a translation of that word online, it is almost impossible to find it without it appearing on a church site. In fact, every non-specific church site that I have found, it was still being asked in relation to the Bible, and even then, people said that there was some disagreement about the real meaning of the word. Now, personally, I don't actually care. Without finding a secular professional translator, which I'm not going to do because, let's be honest, there is plenty of bias on both sides, I think I'm going to stick with who gives a crap and say the Bible is worthless to begin with. Tim won't like that, but why would you think I'd care?
If you made it to the end of this video, please consider sharing, liking, saving, and commenting. It all helps get these videos out. We'll see you next time.
No thanks. Then again, I'm not one of the mindless sheep that Tim is making his videos for. Compared to someone like Daniel King, those people actually come out to support him, and I'm not at all impressed. Because this is one place that debating the religious just doesn't interest me, when they are running on pure fifis and faith, and I am looking for actual truth. Well, my book says a thing is not going to impress me in the least, because I don't care what your book says. I care what you can demonstrate is actually so, and when it comes to social issues, proving anything is nigh impossible, because nothing is inherently right or wrong. It's all personal interpretation, and as we know, tons of people are just terrified of anyone who isn't just like they are. It's why religion is so dedicated to converting the world. They get really, really uncomfortable when everyone doesn't have the same thoughts, beliefs, and feelings that they do. This is also why I really don't do a lot of doctrinal videos. I see plenty of atheists arguing the minutiae, but I think that's pointless. If you can't even get to first base, if you can't prove that there is a God in the first place, if you can't prove that the Bible is worthwhile or that any of these things are true, then who cares about dotting your I's and crossing your T's? What difference does it make? So I don't let these people run around making empty claims and then kind of go, well, I disagree, because I don't care if you're a Baptist or an Episcopalian or anything else, if you haven't given me any reason to think that Christianity, any version of Christianity, is true in the first place. Every once in a while, we have to do one of these just to show how silly it is, but that done, let's get back to the actual important questions. Prove that your God is real. Because if you can't do that, then none of the rest of it matters. Enough said.